So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Dhaka Forum, a session focused on rebuilding economies in the post-COVID era. My name is Nisan Abdul Qadir. I'm the Vice President of Africa at WAFTEC and an advisor to government on foreign direct investment related matters. I'm joined by 4 esteemed leaders and decision makers in their fields who are with us today from different parts of the globe. It brings me great pleasure to introduce them today. First off, joining us from Malaysia, we have Dr. Rais Hussein Mohamed Arif, the chairman of the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation. Chairman Arif is a proactive leader in the drive for digital transformation and harnessing the power of technology for economic development, business growth, and reimagining economic systems. Dr. Arif and Chairman, welcome with us today. Next,
thank you.
Next, we have MP Salman Rahman. Salman Rahman is a Bangladeshi businessman and also he is the Member of Parliament and Private Sector Industry and Investment Advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh. He's also an acting president of several trade bodies, including the Association of Television Channel Owners, and at a high level esteem. So thank you, Mr. Rahman, for joining us from Bangladesh today.
Thank you.
Next, we have joining us from Turkey, Ambassador Dato Jaafar Shaari. Mr. Shaari is from Malaysia and is the new Secretary General of the Developing Aid Organization for Economic Cooperation. In his distinguished diplomatic career in the Foreign Service of Malaysia, he served as Malaysia's highest envoy in Qatar, Brunei, and Egypt, among others. Ambassador Shaari, we welcome you and thank you for joining us today. Last but certainly not least, we have Honorable MP Mohammed Abdul Mannan, who's the Planning Minister of Bangladesh since 2019 and has held several high positions in the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Director General in the Prime Minister's Office and Director General of the NGO Affairs Bureau. Mr. Mannan is passionate about development literature and spends his time working for the welfare of the rural people of Bangladesh as well. Honorable MP Planning Minister Mannan, it's a pleasure to have you today, as well as it is an honor to be with you today. As we all may know, we live in interesting times. Each country and person has discovered further its fragility, reflected in the dependence on the rest of the world to satisfy the maintenance of the way of living, and at the same time, the isolation and loneliness when attempting to respond to a major exogenous shock. To characterize this current situation as febrile would be an understatement, given that the goalpost shifts daily. We see figures from the World Bank, the OECD, and UNCTAD forecasting and envisioning a baseline of 5.2% contraction in the global GDP in 2020. Even though governments have sought to counter the effects of the downturn with fiscal and monetary policies. UNCTAD has estimated almost a 30 to 40% decline in global foreign direct investment. So what does this mean? In essence, not one entity or country is immune. Emerging markets and developing countries, many of which face daunting vulnerabilities, it has been critical for them to strengthen public health systems, address macroeconomic challenges, posed by informality, and also implement reforms that will support strong and sustainable growth once the health crisis abates. While we're, I'm sure that our panelists would agree with me, while we're quick to utilize the language of gloom and doom, the human experience story has always been one of resilience, of rebuilding. Here today, we are going to explore the mechanisms and the way our distinguished leaders here today with us have used to help economies and people mitigate the downward pressure of this crisis, the measures taken by private sector and government, and the lessons taught by this crisis and the way forward in this new normal. So without further ado, I'd like to begin with our first panelist, Dr. Mohamed Arif and Chairman. This global predicament has silenced any lingering doubts of the necessity of the digital revolution for business sustainability. In your context, over 55% of CEOs in Malaysia acknowledge the need to digitally reform and transform, and the remaining proportion also suggests otherwise. We have rare exceptions where we see that a large proportion of sectors such as health, education, agriculture, and to a certain extent, transport and e-commerce, embracing this digital transformation. Nonetheless, there are still some sectors that are lagging behind. So, a question for you, Chairman Arif: what would your inputs be to some of these sectors that are lagging behind? And which are these, or in your context? And would you say that expediting this digitalization or digital solutions will accelerate this economic growth? Off to you.
I think we have known the realities. We saw the realities as we speak, and we saw that from a very high touch economy where everything is done through physical means is gradually going into low touch economy, which means highly there's any touch, it's all done remotely. Digital disruption is threatening the existence of non-digital companies. This is a statement of fact in a given current context of COVID-19, where social distancing and all that measures to be taken have to be taken to combat and control the spread of the virus. About 50% of the S&P 500 companies will be replaced over the next 10 years. And McKinsey prediction in the context of Malaysia were to increase digital adoption in all our industries. We will be able to increase, if we do that, we will be increase our GDP by 400 billion ringgit by 2025. Some Malaysian sectors have embraced digital industries, especially those sectors that have been disrupted. We know financial, media, the newspapers are slowly going out of fashion. Everything is going to be online, oil and gas, and etc. However, the rest still need to catch up from digital readiness perspective, such as wholesale, retail, and manufacturing. Granted, many of the transaction during the movement control order that was initiated recently, all the transaction was done online. The businesses like Grab and those gig economy really flourished, and all these things are actually enabling the digital economy is actually enabling these things. We need to move forward with healthcare, education, tourism, and agriculture. When the university were closed for students, they all went e-learning. Are we ready for the e-learning? That's a very big question to answer. In the context of Malaysia, we went through our own experiences. Now, if you ask me what are the key challenges that we face, the number one challenges will be lack of structured approach towards digitization. Many people talk about digitization, but what is the meaning of digitization? What levels of digitization? This has to be spoken about quite extensively. Budget availability or priorities within the organization. Some organizations feel that adopting digitization will incur extra costs. On the long term, on the long run, they wouldn't know that the digitization is actually bring a lot more benefit than cost. Lack of digitally skilled workforce. The good news about Malaysia, we have a lot of good talents in this area. So this will actually enable if the digitization is gone full blown. Digital technology is moving too rapid for some companies. Those days we talk about digitization or digitization of economy in decades. Nowadays you can't even talk in quarters or even monthly. Things change so fast. In Malaysia, we have introduced many initiatives. 2 years ago, for instance, the government launched Industry Forward Policy, which is actually in response to the call for digitization transformation or digital transformation of the manufacturing sector. So there are many areas in the area of facilitating company to embrace the 4.0. I always like to go back and say that if you fail to embrace 4.0 in a given current context, then you are actually preparing for a disaster. They say failure to plan is planning to fail. 4R is a thing now, is going to be the thing in the near future, and that is the only one that is going to take us forward.
Thank you, Chairman Arif. Those were very insightful things, and I agree with you in terms of what you have said. In the context of Malaysia, there's been a push for industrialization and the embracing of digital 4.0. You mentioned that the sectors that have embraced these are those that have been disrupted and have almost no choice. Whereas there, in the sectors of healthcare, tourism, and agriculture, there's still a bit of work to do, and especially with regards to how we structure the digitalization, if that you have mentioned, and this means that it requires sort of budgetary considerations as well as a structure to move forward to facilitate this digital transformation. And I think we've all been privy to the fact that we have to transform and we have to move forward. So, a country that also has shown this kind of readiness to digitally transform. It's been about 11 years since the digital Bangladesh. I would move my next question to Honorable MP Rahman. It's been about 11 years, as I mentioned, since the launch of the Digital Bangladesh Agenda, where human resource development, connecting citizens, digital government, and promoting the ICT industry plays a central role in aiding this fantastic growth story. Today, more than 120 Bangladeshi companies are exporting ICT products worth nearly almost $1 billion USD to 35 countries. So this has shown quite tremendous growth, which is anchored by the pursuit of digital penetration. So on this note, what are still areas that you are focusing on during this present crisis? Are there any public and private sector initiatives taken to promote resiliency? And what are areas that still need work, if you may?
What I'll do is that first I'll just give you a brief background on the digitalization of Bangladesh. As you yourself mentioned, 11 years ago, our Honorable Prime Minister, she said she wanted to make Bangladesh digital. And at that time, many people were quite skeptical that, is it possible for a country like Bangladesh to really become digital? And some of the things which we were able to achieve is really remarkable. One of the things which we have been able to do is that we have got a fiber optic backbone, which we have been able to lay up to our union level, which is, the villages. So the whole country is now connected with a fiber optic backbone. And then, of course, we have now our own satellite, which we have launched, and we are connected to the submarine cable. So the basic infrastructure of digitalization is in place. And that has really helped the development of the digital, in the sense that we now have also a huge amount of young people, which you yourself mentioned that there is a lot of export taking place. We have a huge amount of young people, the freelancers, who are working from home. In fact, in a recent World Economic Forum and Oxford University survey report, which was published last year, shows that after India, Bangladesh has the second largest number of freelancers working from home. And the reason this has been possible is because we have given them that infrastructure, that they have the broadband connectivity. And you mentioned that $1 billion export is being made to over 35 countries. In fact, what we feel that the export is more. It's more to the tune of $2 to $3 billion. We are not being able to capture the entire statistics because the infrastructure of payment terms and how the export takes place, this is something new. It's a very new area. So, how the export is taking place, whether all the funds are digitally, as you know, in the digital environment is global. So how to capture all this data and actually see what is happening, that's what we are actually now working on. We are starting to create a database for the freelancers, and there are a lot of initiatives and incentives which have been given for the ICT business. Now, coming to your question, this is just to give you a little bit of background on what we have achieved. Coming to your question on how we were facing this crisis. Well, like your other panelists mentioned, actually, it's really getting online now. There is no other alternative. You have to really take advantage of the digital environment. And all over the world, we are seeing that in all areas, people are now having to depend very heavily, in fact, on the digital infrastructure which is in place. In our case, what we have been doing is, since we were already, since we had the infrastructure in place, so we have been, a lot of our meetings are being handled online. On the health side, and we have been working very much how we can do this, telemedicine. We are talking about remote handling of the health sector through the digital platforms. That has been doing. But in addition to that, what is also very, very important, and which your other panelist said, and I agree with him, that we have to get ready for the fourth IR, because the fourth industrial revolution, where you're bringing in all these, the artificial intelligence and all the stuff that is happening, we have to be ready for that. And in our case, in Bangladesh, we are seeing that many of our companies are actually adopting to this, getting ready for for IR. And we have, and then there are some very basic things which we have done. We have this, we have set up these high-tech park authority we have, and we are setting up a number of high-tech parks all over the country, where we have young entrepreneurs who can do startups. For startups, the government provides a lot of incentives. We give them venture capital. The government provides venture capital to young entrepreneurs who want to do startup in the IT sector. We provide them with physical facilities. And we are now seeing that both in the hardware and software areas, Bangladesh has been doing very well. Recently, a private sector company of ours has been exporting mobile phones, laptops to Turkey, to the United States. So all of these things are happening. And I feel that the digital sector will definitely help towards sustaining the economy. But having said this, one cannot only rely on digital, because like in Bangladesh, we are a country of 165 million people. And for us, food security is very, very important. And so we are having to rely on agriculture, and we have to make sure that our agriculture sector is also robust. There, of course, again, as far as the distribution is concerned, as far as there we try to see whether we can use digital platform for in the agriculture sector also. That is also being looked at. But the real sector also cannot be ignored. I know that digital is very, very important, but work on the real sector also needs to be done. And of course, the health sector is very, very important in this pandemic, and we are now strengthening our health systems. That is the other area where we have to concentrate on.
Thank you, Honorable MP Rahman. I think you mentioned in your statement that it is indeed, the question of digital structuring is very important. It's necessary to have the proper digital infrastructure to be able. So I think in what you mentioned about Bangladesh, the success story is anchored by strong digital infrastructure and a readiness of supporting the private sector. And then you mentioned something quite interesting, which brings me into our next our next panelist, is that we cannot ignore other sectors, even the lagging ones, in terms of this transformation. Digital is quite important. It's not exclusive to other sectors, but we need to focus on the building blocks, which brings me to health. So in terms of the next panelist, Ambassador Shaari, in this crisis, we have been taught that the health component is not independent of economic growth. It comes in a timely manner. The implementation of the D8's Health and Social Protection Program, a project that incorporates health as a catalyst for economic prosperity and aims to bring about the linkage between economic prosperity and human capital development, is quite timely. So far, Ambassador Shaari, how has the program been used to realize effective economic recovery for the member countries? And what are the plans going forward in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, let me express, my appreciation for your keen interest in the D8 Health and Social Protection Program. In short, we call it D8HP. It is rather a new initiative, but something that we take pride in establishing it, since COVID-19 has showed how timely the program is. And well-being and overall health outcome of a country depends on its economy. But in fact, the causality is much stronger, the other way around. And countries who invest heavily in their sector prosper. I think one can look at the example of the Scandinavian economies for an exemplary health-led growth model. Now, WHO reports that an increasing health spending by 1% of national GDP will save over 60 million lives a year, as well as increasing the average global lifespan by 3.7 years by the year 2030, and boost economic growth by 2 to 4%. So health has always been proposed as an area of cooperation among the D8 member states, but it was not until last year when we had the opportunity to build a solid framework of collaboration. So we had the opportunity to appoint one public health expert from Nigeria, and we established our program office in Abuja recently. And we connect this program office to the leading global institute, such as the WHO and the Chatham House. So what we plan to do was to have this goal. One is to expand basic primary health care service. We want to improve health governance and overall quality. We want to explore untapped market opportunities. We want to prevent non-communicable diseases. We want to extend social protection to the poor. This is a master plan, but especially due to the crisis, we will work now even step by step to achieve all this target. Then we had the opportunity to organize the HSP webinar together with many other international organizations, such as Chatham House. We have Global Women Leaders, we have Chester Global, Islamic Development Bank, and some other important organizations. And I believe that the level of interest and eagerness from all parts to further the partnership, I think, will bring some good result. And in line with the request from member state, Health Program Office will now initially focus its attention on closely monitoring the global vaccine efforts and collaborate with international bodies to ensure smooth access to our member states. And acting as a dialogue platform to share knowledge among the health experts in our countries and accelerate exchange and cross-training of healthcare professionals among the member states. And, this is very important because we look at the world average for physicians in particular in the member state. Now, per 1,000 people, only we have 1.4 doctors. So the average stand at 0.97. This is lower than the global average. So, however, there are members like Iran, Malaysia, Turkey that are above this average. And therefore, we believe that we should build mechanism to educate more doctors, specialists, and generalists to ensure a better public health response in all our member states. And so this is our task further. And I'm happy that we plan, in fact, to have, in fact, we have established a working group that connect between all the member state Ministry of Health. And now they are talking about finding a way, not only to address this COVID-19 issues, but we are looking at the impact on the economy. So working group has been established, and we plan also to have a ministerial meeting of health ministries with a view to look at how we can address the economic impact, of member state. And hopefully then we would be able also to convince leaders to come forward with a view of providing something like a facility of fund where we can engage global partners. So these are some of the new initiatives that we are undertaking in the health sector. So that's what I can share right now, just to address this issue of health. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Shaari. That's very good. I mean, I think you bring about quite a distinctive and unique view to this panel and this conversation in terms of how we cannot forget the backdrop of health as a driver for economic prosperity, and really the recovery or the rebuilding of economies will also be largely dependent on how governments and private sector and organizations such as yourself respond to this crisis and act fast and reasonably in terms of a long-term view. And actually, this brings me to my next panel questions. When we look at the areas that are most vulnerable, in the start of this conversation in the panel, I mentioned how in emerging economies in developing countries we have the most vulnerable populations, especially within the urban and rural poor, that are most impacted by this crisis. And my next question is to Honorable MP Planning Minister, Mr. Abdul Mannan. A World Bank report outlined, released earlier in April this year, suggested that the urban poor in Bangladesh will be hardest hit, while the number of additional poor will be higher in rural areas and agrarian and food sectors. In terms of your experience, what are some of the mitigations the government and private sectors are planning to support in the hardest hit rural regions and also regions alike? And what measures do we need to take to overcome these challenges in the short and longer term, if you may?
Thank you, Nisan, and my salams to other panelists here. Thank you for having me this afternoon. The issue of pandemic and then health and poverty and livelihood, these are all sort of mixed together. When we were hit by COVID-19 initially, the first response was, of course, to save lives. Because we had no prior experience about handling this menace, and our health system was not geared for this kind of emergency. As it is, we are a low-income country still, moving into the lower middle-income level. So, such a large population and unknown difficulty of COVID, in a sort of way, it pushed the government to taking immediate measures in saving lives. So, in that, the first few weeks were spent in reorganizing the health system, in looking at both urban as well as the rural sides, because people are living all over. About 70% people live in the rural areas. So the first few weeks, as I said, were spent in reorganizing the health system, finding serious gaps here and there, and trying to fill up and raise the level across the board. Immediately following that, the question of livelihood also moved in. As you know, we are a developing country, and about 80% of our working people work in the informal sector, meaning that they are on a daily wage basis, either in the agriculture or in the off-farm activities. Like in major cities, people work from day to day. They find a job in the morning and go home in the evening, and sort of this sort of living. Now, these are undocumented, unorganized, but they're very stable labor force. They contribute hugely to the local economy. Now, these people have not much savings, not and they don't have the security of job as the other organized sector has. Now, for our 20% poor that we already, from our previous estimate, we knew we have about 20% poor. For them, for the last few years, we've been running what we call a social safety net program, providing small scale cash support to all these people, about 2 millions across the country. For the last 10, 15 years, we are extending it every year. Who are people beyond the age of 65, who are physically handicapped, uh, who can't find job, this sort of thing. So with this COVID now, when the informal sector was in disarray and city dwellers, particularly the workers, had to move to their rural homes to find support. So what happened? They immediately went to the rural addresses where they have parental home, and the local system of our local government, which is elected, they had to take them on board, and they became a sort of a charge on the social safety net program. Now, immediately, our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina declared a program, as you've heard of, about 100 million uh, in our Dhaka, which is about 10 billion US dollars, I think, in rough estimate, as support for the economy across the board for everyone, but particularly to the lower income group. And also, she declared directly for 5 million families, which means 20 million people, a cash grant of about $25 a month for the next 3 months, which were transmitted to them over the telephone to our system here directly, so that they had no middleman. It could be immediately transmitted to them. So this way we tackle this immediate new poor, we call them. Like we have new normal, we have new poor here. Earlier we had about 20 million, about 20% people. Now it shot up to about 30, 35 by some estimate. Mercifully, the situation is now improving with the opening of the economy. Some people are coming back into the informal economy. They are finding their old vocations and old wage work, and slowly things are improving. But then again, we have to move into the other sectors of the economy, particularly the manufacturing sector. Our large ready-made garments, they were also initially disturbed. Many of the buyers had gone away, had cancelled the order. Some of the industries had to close down, and the workers needed support. So our government provided 2 months of wages, 2 months of salary for every worker. So this was the initial cushion that we provided. Now we have been able to regroup, reorganize, and we are now thinking of uh, continuing support system for the lower 20% of our population for the next 3 months, direct cash support, as I said earlier, as well as food support, as well as other supports like free medical support in the rural medical clinics, and then also in other ways like providing books for the children, providing school meals for the primary school level children where most of the poor people's children go. So in that way we are trying to cope. We can't say that we are able to handle everything, but then there has been no incidence of large scale hunger, not even small scale hunger as a matter of fact. And the jolt is now over, and we are back on track, hopefully with support of uh, of the global community, because this needs a dual approach. Domestically, we have to regroup and reshape and recover ourselves, as well as we have to establish our trade links with our earlier trade partners. We have to go into the export business immediately as early as we can and bring in that cash support, as well as also very important last point, our remittance support which we receive from our workers in the Middle East, in the Gulf countries, and in Malaysia also. So these people, uh, who some of them uh, were also thrown out of job, we heard. So we have to talk with those governments and also try to bring them back into the job so that the system can be brought back on track as early as we can. And we need support from everyone, least of all from D8, which is here. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your intervention, especially when we talk about reorganizing health systems as well as supporting and amplifying the social safety net for the informal sector. It's very interesting that you also mentioned that there's sort of a new core that's being established, or a returning, establishment as more and more people, left us straight out of the population that was in the informal sector and formalized the activities. They're seeing this crisis bringing them back into, other areas and sectors that to obviously live by day by day. And given that 80% are in the informal sector, this is a large majority of the population. You mentioned something that was quite interesting, and as this part of this conversation that we are having today, I'm really glad to hear the opening viewpoints from all of the panelists. And Mr. Manan, as we were just talking about, you mentioned the textile sector and the garment sector. One of the reasons why China still holds ground in its enterprises due to its economies of scale. Bangladesh has built this in terms of, as well, with the textile sector. And this is both a question to Mr. Manan as well as Mr. Rahman. I'd like your viewpoints as what measures can be taken to ensure this economies of scale can be leveraged for developed economies looking to reduce their dependence on China. I'll start with Mr. Manan if possible.
Difficult question. My senior colleague here, Mr. Rahman, who is an advisor, better. He's a private sector big businessman himself. If you would kindly transfer this question to him, and then after him, maybe I'll be.
No problem.
Actually, Bangladesh, as far as the textile sector is concerned and the economic of scales are concerned, after China, we are the second largest exporters of garments in the whole world. So we have a huge backward linkage in the garment industry. The whole garment textile trade is fully integrated. It's vertically integrated. Starting from a bale of cotton, we end up with a shirt, and we do all the things in between. So that is already in place. What is very, very interesting, and that is which has happened, is that we are seeing a huge new opportunity because of this crisis, and that is converting our garment industry to manufacture PPEs. And we've already many garment factories have already started manufacturing PPEs. And the other thing which we are doing is masks. You see, masks is becoming a huge it's a huge commodity now. The kind of demands which we are seeing for masks is absolutely unbelievable. And I think that whatever business the textile industry has lost as far as fashion garments goes, that will easily be replaced with the masks and other PPEs, the gowns. There are certain infrastructure works, again, we need to do here. And that, most important of that is testing. You see, when you want to export medical PPEs, each of the importing countries, they want test results. These are not, it's not like just exporting a fashion garment. So you have to, and we don't have testing facilities, adequate testing facilities in the country. But Honorable Prime Minister has instructed that these testing facilities should be set up immediately, and we are in the process of doing that. And we are hopeful that within 4 to 6 weeks, we will have world-class laboratories in place, and then we need them to be accredited. Luckily, the Bangladesh Accreditation Board, which is under the Ministries of Industry, is already internationally recognized. So we will get that accreditation. And once that happens, then I think the PPE export will be also a very, very big business. And of course, for the fashion garments, where people wanting to move out of China, Bangladesh, of course, can easily meet that requirement because that infrastructure already exists. But I think rather than being that, it's the market is a huge market, and I think we should be globally we should be complementary to each other rather than there shouldn't be only competition. There are many areas where we can globally countries can be complementary to each other in this trade. If Honorable Planning Minister would like to add something.
Thank you. He is himself very big private sector tycoon, so I thought he would have this better. Yes, in the garments, the fear is that we are a single product market, and unless we diversify very quickly, we could land into trouble. So we've been quietly changing. One aspect which Mr. Rahman was mentioning, COVID has opened for us an opportunity in the medical apparel business, masks or PPE, whatever. And I have heard from Mr. Rahman himself, some of our garments industries are transferring into these new areas, have received very large orders, including from markets in the US. So here is a big possibility. But having said that, COVID is not going to be here for all time. Our textile sector will have to remain geared to the global market in the coming days, in the future, in the non-COVID days. In that sense, we are continuously expanding, trying to find new markets. European Union has been our main target until now. That is a solid destination for our export. We would like that this is expanded. China has given us a huge concessional grant recently in that they have opened up almost all sectors of the economy for duty-free import from Bangladesh, including we are now trying into our neighboring country, big market in India itself, where we can export. So as he was saying, it's not a question of competing each other out, trying to find, we help, you help, win-win for everyone. That kind of a thing is possible. And garments is something that's not going to die out in the next too many years. So it gives us a solid strength here, but at the same time, we have to diversify within the market itself and beyond the market also. That's what Mr. Ramani, as an advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister in these matters, is handling that. And of course, I'm around here to help him also. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable speakers. I think it's quite interesting, and that you brought that the world is big enough, and there is also new opportunities that come out from moments of crisis, such as the repurposing of manufacturing and garment industries into social and health protection, which also Ambassador Shaari has mentioned that is also a move that ministries have had to work with private sector to create that linkage, which is quite interesting in terms of looking at this top-down and bottom-up approach. My next questions go to Chairman Arif. You mentioned that there needs to be sort of rapid interventions. And my question for you is, how can government as well as private sector ensure rapid interventions for private entities who survived the pandemic or in the process of surviving, and how can technology play a role in ensuring these interventions are fair and widespread to ensure that a majority of the population, the regions are impacted positively?
I think we can all agree that we are facing a very unprecedented situation. We have never faced this kind of circumstances situation globally. We had Great Depressions before in 20s and 30s, but that was pocketed. But this time around, it is the impact is globally. So when we face with unprecedented situation, we cannot face it with precedented solution. The solutions must be out of the box. I think this is very important. I think one of the speakers just now mentioned about not only talking about 4IR and technology, they must be also focused on agri, for instance, food security, for instance. I am 100% with him because food security, safety, and sovereignty is very, very important and key in any nation building and rebuilding the economy. I'll just give a very quick example. In Malaysia, post-COVID-19, or we are still in the COVID-19 era, many people think we are out of the COVID-19. I do not think so. We have not found a vaccine. We are still far away from vaccine. Hopefully, we'll find a vaccine, and that will bring us a little bit more comfortable, a comfort zone. But for now, we are still in the COVID-19 era. Now, due to the shutdown that we had to do, the movement control order, it has affected many in the country. The SMEs were affected. In Malaysia, more than 34% contribution to the GDP is by the SMEs. They employ about 7 million resources. That is Malaysian. Forget not those who are also working under the SME from foreign as a foreign labor. So SMEs employ large chunk of them. So it's very important that government come up with out of the box solution. So when this pandemic came about, we were toying with the idea of how to survive this situation, circumstances, and then when we are ready to restart the economy. So our plan was survive to restart the economy. During the survival period, we introduced a lot of measures, wage subsidies, soft loans to SMEs, even some facilitations and assistance in terms of loans, even moratorium on loans repayment, and so on and so forth. So that when we are ready, then we can actually restart the economy fairly quickly. This is very important. Coming back to what are the specific policies that we need to really endeavor, I think the most important policy that Malaysia have used it oftentimes is the public-private partnership. And this public-private partnership has been always a success story in Malaysia. We have, in terms of economic recovery, we have been actively working with government agencies, corporates, association, technology providers, and to continue to push the digital transformation agenda. Now, I understand some people are a little, when we talk about digital transformation, I repeat again, in the future, or already we are in now, 4IR is going to lead that situation. More than 600 to 800 million jobs are going to disappear or made obsolete without the advent of 4IR. Countries must embrace 4IR, even in agri, for instance. There are many agri-tech initiatives that can quadruple the yield with the same level of acreage. Scandinavian countries, somebody mentioned about Scandinavian countries, they have done remarkably well in this area. And so digitization of the economy is very important, very key. And in Malaysia, for instance, we have introduced many plans. Some what we call as a penjana is actually to create awareness on top of that, and more importantly, to be able to stimulate the economy. So it is very key that this digitization is to be seen as a holistic approach, not just put it online, put it on platform. No. Another big problem, for instance, in the agricultural sector, the problem of middlemen. Nowadays, we have huge platforms in Malaysia where the buyers and sellers, they can be B2B, can be B2C, and for once, the farmers actually enjoy the fruit of intense labor and not just the middlemen. So there are various what we call initiatives and policies. Obviously, time may not allow me to discuss that, but private-public partnership is very key towards recovery, towards facing this recovery period. Now we are in the restart recovery period, and it's going to be challenging, but again, if everyone works together, we are indeed, borders have been bridged. Nowadays, businesses are not constrained to just borders. We buy things from China, we buy things from all online. Things have changed remarkably. So if you want to stay traditionally, then the country will lose out.
Thank you, Chairman Arif. That was very productive, and you do touch upon the sectors that need to actually focus on and diversify, but also take into account that it's not just so digital. We don't just do digital for the sake of being digital, but rather to ensure that we streamline activities and we better respond to these crises in the future. And so my actually next question goes to Ambassador Shaari. Mr. Manan was mentioning earlier in the discussion that there is a need. I think, as all of us recognize, that there will be a need for investment into this crisis, right? And many global organizations, as well as the G20, have mentioned that they are pledging over millions into this crisis, a figure of I believe 5 trillion into the global economy to counter the pandemic amid forecasts of a deep recession. We're currently still in the COVID era, as Chairman Arif has mentioned, and I just wanted to get your perspective on where do you see these funds being redirected to and allocated, or where should they be allocated to at a top level perspective? How do you think it's going to counter economic downturns in hard hit countries and sectors?
Thank you. Let me first of all stress this point that we have 2 member countries that are a member of G20, Indonesia and Turkey, and of course they also represent the global south. And I believe they add the importance of developing countries' perspective. Now, I remember that the last Leaders Summit stressed that the G20 is very committed to do whatever it takes to overcome the pandemic. I think that's a very good statement, along with other international organizations. And this strong statement, I hope, will compensate for the lack of before the global leadership and cooperation. So we look forward to perhaps a new way forward to address this issue. And as we are all aware that the last G20 finance ministers and central bankers meeting held just a week ago on 18 July noted that an outstanding $11 trillion had been spent by the G20 nation to support their economies. And almost 90% of that funding has been in the form of fiscal stimulus. It was distributed to support households, save businesses, bail out industries, and also they agreed to defer the debt payments of the world's poorest nation, which are good, certainly objective. Now, however, we know that G20 also has been criticized for not doing enough. And some NGOs and national bodies insisted that the debt deferral to be extended to middle-income countries too, also must be implemented. And also there is the ongoing debate about lending out special drawing rights from rich nations to the low-income economies, there where we stand here in the aid. These are substantial requests, and we know that this issue is still pending, and we hope they will provide a good answer. Of course, we want to contribute also, and I would like that to say that the pandemic, I think, has shown that it is not about developed countries or developing world. I think we have to address this issue together, because the virus knows no borders at all. So no country is immune. So all economies are strongly interconnected to one another by a channel of trade, investment, financial flows, and even aid. Therefore, we cannot be safe if we do not act collectively. So that's a statement which I like to also address here. So knowing that no country has an immunity and there is no success without acting collectively, so it depends on how we implement the right policies. So in this regard, suspension and cancellations of debt certainly is a legitimate demand at this time, and it will be a noble and timely action if G20 countries act upon this request. So let me say also that the IMF reports that G20 countries have already contracted by 3.4% in the first quarter of 2020. And the second quarter contraction will be even more severe. So G20 countries are not in a privileged position themselves, as much as we all want to see benevolent global leadership. we cannot expect countries to forgo their national priorities entirely. And therefore, let me also share some of our views of how the fund and how this should be reimbursed and for benefit of all. Number one, I believe that the important element of protecting human life, they have to take necessary action to ensure the protection of valuable human life, lift rate restrictions on essential COVID medication, personal protective equipment, sanitary product, and vaccine. Two, we have to relieve financial burden. So give developing countries a breathing space so that they reach out to their citizens and help communities. I think this is not only issue of economy. I always believe that this is an issue of humanity. We work on a master plan to allocate resources in the most effective way and smoothen their access to capital market in this time of great need, meaning to say that we should, and I agree with Dr. Rais when he mentioned about the importance to digitalize all. I think this will be the future and people would have to engage, and we have to benefit people at large, either the small vendors on the street, people who are working from home. We need to empower them to have this capacity. Number three, save what can be saved. I think it is clear that not all jobs and industries can or will be saved. So funds should be redirected to areas that will yield the highest and most desired outcome. Supporting greener and more digital business model may act as a priority. So funds should enable countries to train their labor force for the new market condition. And fourth, idea is to share and learn. So the biggest challenge ahead is the vaccine. And World Health Organization has been the front runner in coordinating global efforts in that sense. So COVID-19 vaccine global access or COVAX facility is an equitable platform to ensure access to COVID-19 tests, treatments, and vaccine. So 165 countries now have already expressed in the alliance. So funds should be allocated as to ensure each country have incessant access to vaccine, and all countries benefit from the recent research and know-how. So that is our view. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shaari, and your input and capacity in terms of stressing the point of saving lives and ensuring that first and foremost, these funds get redirected to the health of most vulnerable. One thing that I'd like to sort of share with you is that we have here on our panel some very distinguished leaders. We have from two countries that are leaders in the digital revolution and transformation. We've also seen from the input from Mr. Rahman that freelancers are, Bangladesh has one of the highest rates of freelancers and remote working professionals. So I'll open the floor to see who would like to step in and discuss how can Malaysia and Bangladesh maybe work together and take advantage of this large pool of freelancers to both benefit their respective economies. Perhaps I'll start with Mr. Rahman as a private sector industry expert, and then everyone else can maybe add a few points.
That's a very good suggestion, and actually I would like Chairman Arif to will offer our services from Bangladesh. All the freelancers are more than happy to, if there is an opportunity to cooperate with Malaysia, very much so. I'd just like to mention that, we have, since we have a very large population, we are the 8th largest country in terms of population in the world. We have our infrastructure is that our payment, how to use the digital. For example, in the recent when Honorable Prime Minister had said that for the garment workers for 3 months, the government provided, in fact 4 months now, government provided the salaries for all the garment workers, because the garment is our biggest sector, and the garment workers, and majority of them are women. So what the finance ministry said was that what they want to do is that they want to send the money, the salary to the worker through the mobile phone. And many of the workers did not have accounts, I mean, did not have a mobile phone account. But when they heard that this is how they will get the salaries, it's unbelievable. Within a very, very short period, all the workers, and we are talking about nearly a large number of workers, I think nearly over 1 million workers have all gone and made these, taken these mobile wallets and have done it. So this is how our digital thing is very much there. So recently, a team of Bangladeshi software people have got a large contract from Japan. One of the big Japanese banks have used Bangladesh. So definitely for Malaysia, I think, yes, we would love to cooperate with Malaysia on the digital side. And I agree that there is a huge opportunity, like you mentioned, on agriculture, using artificial intelligence, using drones to do the mapping of the fields. And all these works are very, very, the possibilities are endless, actually. But one really needs to put our mind to it and see how we can take the best advantage of the digital opportunity.
Thank you, Honorable Untitled Rahman. Do we have any other comments, maybe from Chairman Dr. Rais Arif?
If I may say, in response to the other speaker just now, yes, Malaysia is already home to a large size of our Bangladeshi brothers who help in our building of our economy. So yes, ahlan wa sahlan, please do come. The important thing that we have to remember is the biggest challenge for countries in Asia and emerging markets to fully embrace digitalization would be the new or need for new jobs and skill set. I think this is the very key word, yeah? Need for new jobs and skill sets. As I said earlier, things are moving fast. I mean, we were talking about decades. Now we can't even talk about quarters. For countries like with aging population like Korea, Japan, robotics automation offer a way out. For country where there is a workforce is growing, such as India and perhaps Bangladesh themselves, Indonesia, challenge is to create new jobs in this kind of trends. And you go into technological progress, we need to have technological progress that can boost productivity, growth, creating new jobs, transforming jobs and skills with old jobs, and firms disappearing and new ones emerging. So these are the basic three major trends that you will see with regards to 4IR. And as I said in my preamble, that if you do not embrace 4IR, as McKinsey report said also, 600 to 800 million jobs are going to be obsolete. So we have to do something. Food security, sovereignty, and safety is going to be the biggest factor in the next 10 years. And that has to be addressed. Recently, during the COVID-19, when the borders are closed, Malaysia had some challenges with regards to food safety, security, and sovereignty. Yes, we are managing it well, but still we are net importer of food. We need to manage it better. So somebody talked about the drones and fertigation, a combination of fertilizing and irrigation, where you drop the cost by more than 60% and you quadruple your yield. Suddenly the farmers become millionaires. So these are the things that we need to look at. How can we sustain the human life? At the end of the day, whether you are Malaysia, Bangladesh, or Istanbul, or wherever you are, we are all part of the big family called human family. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other inputs with regards to this before we move to the closing? Or?
If I can just share my. So I think this is a very important point expressed by the minister and so on. I like to tap on that opportunity about the relation between Malaysia and Bangladesh. Of course, many things are being done bilaterally, but I want to say in the context of D8 cooperation. We have initiated a few programs that hopefully can be launched during the Dhaka summit of D8 to take place hopefully this year. And so 3 programs that within that context that we can work together. Number 1, we are going to launch what we call a digital D8 payment card. And that D8 payment card will address the need for the citizen of D8 in particular to use it for digitally in order to engage in business transaction. And one of the platforms that we are building is just to provide a facility for migrant workers. We have, good cooperation between Bangladesh and Malaysia in, these skilled migrant workers that are working in Malaysia. So we will create a special platform online where we will use our local currency to avoid exploitation and, by the third party whenever they send their salary back, and they would receive in local currency in their country directly to the family. One of the things. We are now doing a pilot test with universities and different agencies in Malaysia and at advanced level. And I think this is one answer that I can provide. Another initiative that we hope to be launched. We have created this initiative working with the private sector, a banking sector in particular, to create what we call a D8 creative economy and financial center that will provide the opportunity that we will use more of the Islamic tool. Zakat, Wakaf, Islamic finance. We are developing it also through engaging digitalization. It's going to be latest technology to be used, and we plan hopefully that we'll build a new landmark in Kuala Lumpur once it is launched and approved by the leaders. So in this, we will address the issue of creating new economy where we will engage people at large. So we bring people to be nurtured to be entrepreneurs. So providing them skill, providing them funds, and part of it will be also for humanitarian purposes. So we will look at the human capital in particular. And so a number of agencies in Malaysia are now coming to partner with us. And we even come up with a new idea. Perhaps a Wakaf land can be turned into a kind of economic zone where factories can use Wakaf land to produce their product. I'm sure in Bangladesh, in particular textile industry and some other industries can also benefit from this kind of arrangement. The next one, which we are now talking to Ministry of Trade of Turkey, and Alhamdulillah, we get a very good support, and through our D8 Chambers of Commerce industry, agreeing to establish something that we call a private sector barter trading system. I think COVID has given us this opportunity that we will go back by using again digital economy and system process where we will work with one bank to provide as a clearinghouse so that companies can have contract between them, to either work to produce some good thing. For example, Bangladesh produce raw material, and one company in Turkey or Malaysia produce some technology. And we can do exchange because in Turkey they've already done it. So we are bringing this idea also to benefit other member states. So these are 3 initiatives that we are undertaking. Hopefully we will be able to launch it with the support from all member states. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable speakers. And yes, I would like to, as we near the close of our session today, I must say that I've learned a lot from all of you on your different perspectives, and I would like to maybe pose a last, closing statement from all of you on the lessons learned. If we were to go, say, 6 months back, and we were to respond to this crisis all over again, what would you do in terms of your responses? What would your suggestions and best practices be? So you could maybe draw upon your respective experiences and learning lessons on this, and your suggestions. The topic of this discussion today is how do we rebuild our economies? We've talked about digital transformation. We've talked about focus on health and the livelihood. So if you could just maybe share a few points in closing, maybe with a few liners for each. I'll start with the Honorable MP, Mr. Manan. If you could please go ahead.
Thank you, Nissan. From the discussion today, this last 1 hour or so, one thing is clear to me: 2 sides of the economy. Ancient agricultural side, which provides food security, the very bedrock on which we live. The other is the extreme, that is the digital side, the last border in the cyber world. So these two ends of the economy will have to be integrated, used for the benefit of our people, for all people everywhere. Because agriculture gives us food security, cyber world provides us immense opportunities where there are no borders, no visas, no passports, just do business on digital basis. So if these opportunities can be used by our young people, be in Turkey, be in Bangladesh or Malaysia, that realization from us in the government or in the leadership will have to be sort of transmitted and arrangements made so that the facilities that are available, the technology are available to our young people also. Thank you. That is what I would like to add here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dato. Chairman Ari, go.
Okay, sometime middle of last year, I co-authored a book called 4IR Reinventing a Nation. In that book, I paved a path together with my co-author on what 4IR would be and what entails to reinvent a nation using 4IR. We talk about technology a lot, but we should not forget to talk about human. It has to be human-centered. So this is where we are in the midst of working very hard towards coming up with a Society 5.0 or Malaysia Vision 5.0. What is Malaysia Vision 5.0? It's going to be a human-centered technology approach. It is not technology-based human approach. So it is a very two different concept. And as it gets a little bit more pregnant, we will share with it. But for now, it's enough to say that the digital infrastructure, digital inclusion, digital government, digital adoption, digital workforce, digital innovation, digital regulation, and digital cybersecurity. These are the way. This is going to be the way forward. Whether it's agriculture, whether it is power, anything for that matter. The last few months have shown us that everything is going to be a low-touch economy, no longer a high-touch economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Arif. And Honorable MP Mr. Rahman, can you maybe share a few notes, closing remarks?
I want to just say is that you made a very interesting remark just now. You said that 6 months ago, if we had the of hindsight, what we have done. And I personally feel that we have lost a lot of very, very valuable lives all over the world. And one of the reasons for that is because this pandemic has actually exposed the weaknesses in our health systems. And you know, when they would say that the weakness is only in the developing countries and that the developed countries, their health system is very robust, this pandemic has shown to us that that's not the case, that if something like that were to happen. So I think, and digitally, you can really use the digital platform to strengthen your health system. There are so many ways of doing it. And in Bangladesh, we are now really working very hard on that. Our Honorable Prime Minister is actually personally spearheading this, is that we have these, in the village level, we have what is called the community clinics. And then at the district levels, we have the hospitals, and at the sub-district levels, we have the hospitals. If all of this could be connected digitally, using telemedicine and a lot of things, now the technology is actually available, then a lot of pressure can be eased on the health system. And I think really we really have to look at our health system, because this, I think, as far as I'm concerned, if something has really, this pandemic has really taught us something, it is that we have to seriously look at every country has to actually go and really revisit the health infrastructure, because the health and safety of the citizens is very, very important. And I think this pandemic has really exposed a lot of weaknesses. I think these should be overcome by all the countries involved.
Thank you very much. And lastly, if I may move on to Ambassador Shaari.
Yes, well, this last 6 months, as you said it just now, has taught us a lot, either negatively or positively. And we have to be ready to face this, what I call uncharted waters. We are not sure what will happen next. And we have to think seriously, actively, changing the mindset of how we do things in particular. I think the whole thing will change. And digitalization will be the new norms that everybody has got to engage. But at the same time, we have to address the need of the people, the citizen at large, because they will be the most affected people in health contact, education contact, work, businesses, and whatever. I think that has got to be focused. That's why I mentioned earlier, this is not an issue of only about economy. It is not only issue about how we address health, but the whole thing is about humanity. So we have to act as one. We cannot just have a split decision. Otherwise, we will never be able to address this issue, properly, accordingly. And hopefully that we will find a vaccine, and that would provide at least a good answer for us to develop a new idea, new way forward. So action has got to be fast. A mindset program, both coming from government, from private sector, from community at large, citizen at large, would have to change the way we do things. And so that's how I look at it. And in fact, talking as Secretary General of an organization, there should be more coordination among the regional cooperation. I think the World Investment Report says a lot about the effect. Globally, I think people would think differently now. Now people would have a regional organization to focus, to coordinate more work that will be much more effective. If we are dealing with issue of supply chain, we are dealing with issue of employment. So we need to develop that kind of a regional cooperation and coordination more and more. And locally as well, we have to ensure that our supply chain will be assured that we will not have a problem with that. I think that's how I look at this kind of a lesson within 6 months. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your interventions and final comments. One thing that starts to mind from the start of this conversation about an hour ago, reminds me of a famous African proverb that goes, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. And I think this really characterizes the nature of our discussion today and the learning lessons we can take forward when we respond to these crises and go to rebuild our economy. If I may just touch upon a few points that have risen during this discussion, as you have mentioned, I think we can all agree that when it comes to matters of health, we do whatever it takes to protect people's lives, medical professionals, and the extremely fragile state of major health systems. It's also very important to make sure that people who are losing jobs are able to survive, to take care of their health, basic services, and it has to be subsidized to some extent. We talked about SMEs to have the resources they needed so they can stay alive. So once we pass this phase, sooner than later, we're able to rebuild our systems. We talked about the diversification of sectors. I've learned from your experience working in South Asia, and I personally work in Africa. And one of the things that we've talked about during this crisis and this during pandemic and post-pandemic resilience is the need to diversify. First of all, the types of partners. So international cooperation is very, very important at this point. In the case of Africa, it's one of the continents that trades more with the rest of the world than itself. Around 200 billion in trade with China alone, and that just the need to diversify both our sectors and our partners. So international cooperation being a strong emphasis that you have mentioned during this conversation. And then, obviously, which we've centered around this discussion quite a bit, is use this opportunity to harness the digital revolution to transform the African economies so they're able to respond to the productive capacity of their to the economies and emerging economies, so they're able to respond to the productive capacity of their own regions. And lastly, I would like to say that we've looked at the discussion. We've seen that everything that we need to do has to be human-centered. We have to look at it from a human-centered perspective. And so to bring this session to a close, I'd first really like to thank all of you for your time and cooperation during discussion. While this is the end to this session, we will be, it isn't an end to the discussion. There's also going to be a published report by the UNDP and A2I that will support this session, and it will be coming up. So stay tuned for that if you're part of this. So thank you for the participants who joined this panel. And we look forward to continuing this engagement further. And if I may also say, thank you for joining our session.
COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on the Bangladesh economy. But Bangladesh is a resilient society. And I think the most important lesson in these pandemic times is the need for a resilient mindset, a mood which should not get panicky over the impacts which are devastating livelihoods and our usual way of understanding how economies function. I think this is the most important thing on which all forces within society need to come together. Having said that, we are obviously facing great many specific challenges. A great number of people have had to migrate out of cities into the rural areas. And I think for the foreseeable future, reconstructing the rural economy will be a key challenge. Indeed, Bangladesh has had to, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, Bangladesh was facing the challenge of finding new growth drivers. And I think this is an opportune time in rethinking agriculture and the rural economy as a whole, both agriculture and non-farm economy, as the potential site for new growth opportunities. The COVID-19 pandemic has made this a necessity. We really need to find out what are the opportunities within agriculture and within our rural economy, which includes, as I said, the non-farm sectors, by which the employment of this huge amount of displaced people, returned migrants, etc. can be accommodated. This is a challenge that economists, policymakers, community leaders all need to think about. I think going forward, one of our preconceptions that agriculture was the backward sector, the sector of yesterday, has to be rethought. Agriculture and the rural economy has to be rethought as the potential economic future, a very important part of the economic future of Bangladesh. And I think the opportunities there are available and should be explored by entrepreneurs, by the youth, by women, by policymakers, by community leaders, by NGOs. All sorts of forces within society should be rethinking that. A second specific challenge which I want to highlight is the human capital part of it. The restrictions on mobility has meant closure of schools and educational institutions. Today's youth face great uncertainty about their human resource future. How will they recover their human capital? This is a question that must exercise our minds across the landscape. And I think here, the danger, though online solutions have appeared and a lot of efforts are going into those areas, but there is a danger of the digital divide becoming even more entrenched, where those who have easy access to digital technology get their human capital opportunities, but a great majority of people lacking those smart solutions, digital solutions, will move further away from quality education. This is a potential danger for our societies, populous societies like ours. our youth in particular, instead of a demographic dividend, it can be the obverse. Here also, I think creative, innovative solutions need to be thought about. In particular, community-based facilities where digital technologies, where groups can come together. Our community centers can be reimagined as new human capital creating centers, utilizing common purpose digital technologies. I think this is a great opportunity to think about. And finally, I would say that the pandemic is forcing us to rethink how we understand infrastructure as a key prop of our economic future. I think infrastructure should not just be thought about as concrete. I think in particular, the health sector, the education sector, and other areas, we have understood that infrastructure means infrastructure which is well managed. The management part of infrastructure must also become a key priority. In particular, our urban infrastructures, our social infrastructures, how we offer the management solutions for such infrastructure should become a very important part of our concerns. So there are many other things that one should be thinking about, but I think I will end on that note that COVID-19 has created what people are calling a new normal, new challenges, great disruptions, great uncertainties. But I think we need to tap our resilient mindset, and if we can address the specific challenges that I mentioned, then Bangladesh can also forge ahead while trying to find the specific creative, innovative solutions that are on the horizon. Thank you.